That's no moon. It's a space station.
Stellaris patch 4.3 has just dropped. We have the full patch notes. We're going to be going through those today. And let me tell you, this is the largest single patch notes I think we've ever had. Bigger than the LEM update, bigger than, 4.0, bigger than pretty much everything. Yes, slightly smaller if you combine the patch notes for all of the 4.0.x patches, because there were like 24 of them. But biggest individual patch notes. That's the headline, ladies and gentlemen. First, I'm going to go over the overall changes coming to the game, then dive into the specifics of the patch notes. These patch notes total 24 sides of A4 paper, so this is going to be a very, very long video. Probably make sure you're at least comfortable. I mean, don't stand up and try and watch this thing through. You might die. Let's move on. Internally, the developers have been calling this patch the Reckoning. Externally, for the rest of us plebs, this is called the Cetus patch, and it boasts an impressive list of balance changes, fixes, and performance improvements, whilst cutting back on the supercharged navies and economies that were introduced with Stellaris 4.0. What are the big ticket items? Well, the naval capacity changes are coming in. There have been significant changes to navies intended to reduce the overall ship counts, and the devs feel that the reduced ship counts make individual ships feel more valuable and interesting. Decoupling ships' naval capacity usage from the Corvette standard has given the devs the opportunity to do things like give frigates their own niche at a point between corvettes and destroyers. There have been major economic changes. This means that after the rebalance, everything is lower. But because all of the empires have lower and reduced economies, this shouldn't actually make you feel less powerful than the other empires you meet in the galaxy. With reductions across the board to unity generation, planetary ascensions, per pop jobs, and a massive change and switch from resource output from jobs, that's basically been eliminated almost everywhere, and converted into job efficiency, which also increases your upkeep. Then there are ascensions and origins. The devs have done a balance pass on the ascension paths to bring them in line with each other balance-wise, and the same to origins. Cybernetic has become a little bit stronger relative to the other ascensions, while psionic and biological have had some of their runaway production bonuses toned down, including a massive decrease to the pop growth that the biological clone ascension can get, because they've changed the way that the job and building create their bonuses. What used to be on the job is now on the building, and somewhat vice versa. Also, those origins that push you into an early ascension have been given particular attention with the objective of pushing this ascension later into the game. Overall ascensions are now going to be completed much later than previously. That's partly because the ascension situation takes about 3 times as long now to complete for each of the ascension paths. The devs would like to thank everyone who has helped them throughout the open beta process. While there are some things that they didn't get into 4.3.0, the devs are going to continue working on them for the future, whether that be in a post 4.3 patch or instead in 4.4, 4.5 or beyond. 4.3.0 Cetus includes massive rebalancing of the ships, of the economy, and significant work on performance. There has been some work on stability, but the game director is saying that the devs have not hit the target that he wanted them to hit, so it will remain one of the primary focuses of the custodian team. That is the time allocated to the programmers for the free patch for the future. Overall, the devs have hit the point where the game director believes it's time to bring the changes to live servers. Iteration and polish will continue, but ladies and gentlemen, this is what you've got for 4.3's release. So these patch notes are very, very long. When printed out in total, this would come to 24 A4 pages. That is 33% longer than 3.1 LEM, which I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe that was the longest patch notes the devs ever released, making 4.3, at least in terms of patch notes, the biggest patch ever. So here we go into these patch notes. The start is a little bit of a preamble. We've had some preamble, yes, but this is more preamble that's got more detail for us. So the 4.3.0 Cetus update focuses on economic balance and performance. Internally, I believe they've called this one the Reckoning. Significant changes have been made to the economy to rebalance it at a generally lower power level, with fewer bonuses or modifiers that stack non-linearly to extreme levels. Some traits, buildings, or district specializations may have changed or even been removed. Certain challenges that have been trivialized over the years may be much stronger, especially roaming space fauna, crises, and fallen empires. Navies have received major changes intended to reduce total ship counts, making each ship individually more valuable and the devs feel more interesting. Ship defenses have been improved, especially for the larger hull sizes, that is your cruisers, battleships, and titans, so combats may last even longer than they previously did. Be aware that the perdition beams on titans now deal collateral damage to nearby ships. Yes, you heard that correctly, they have an AoE effect. Behind the scenes, the Custodian program has focused heavily on performance and stability. This means the game should go significantly faster and be more stable from the very start until the very end. There is one more note saying thank you from the game director for playing Stellaris, and an additional thanks to the many players that have helped the devs and provided feedback during the Cetus open beta. And talking about game performance, specifically looking into lag, this graph shows some benchmark tests the devs ran. This was in a previous dev diary, but I just want to show it off. As you can see from the data here, we are getting much faster speeds in 4.3 even than 3.14. So this is a phenomenal boost to our speed. The graph you're looking at now has game date on the bottom axis, and on the left-hand side axis, the y-axis, we've got seconds per year. 4.3 is so much quicker than even 3.14 that until year 2070, the game is faster in 4.3 at any point than it was in 3.14. That is amazing. And then looking at late game, we're no longer getting a linear increase in seconds per year in the late game. This is probably due to the fleet power and economies being smaller, meaning that we don't have as many ships being simulated, we don't have as many pops being simulated. Some of the changes that have been brought in, I think, are now starting to bear fruit, because we are getting constant, at least in this test, constant seconds per year from about 2400. Yes, there's a bit of noise in the data here, but constant, no change, no increase in lag time in the late game. That is an amazing achievement. Yes, okay, the game is much slower by 2400 than it was at 2200, granted, but if you compare it to 3.14 at 2400, the lag was going up and up and up. It was not slowing down. Okay, there's that weird little artifact right at the end where we get a drop, but overall that is an upward trajectory, pretty linear looking, whereas 4.3 appears to have achieved some form of goddamn stability, and this is amazing. I'm not saying lag is dead, but I mean, look at the graph, people. So how have they achieved this impossible feat of impossibility? Let's dive in. What are the improvements to start with? So this is a big one. The devs have added the possibility to hot join while other players are hot joining. This is insane. This no longer means if you're running a larger multiplayer game, you'll have to cajole all the hot joining players to press the right button at the same time so you can process them simultaneously. Instead, whilst some players are hot joining, you can accept some more hot joiners, and more, and more. This would be amazing. I hope it works. I don't know if it does work. There's massive issues with multiplayer stability at the moment compared to 3.14 and other patches that were really good. But yeah, if this works, wow. The devs have added refugee attraction mechanics. This has refactored how refugees are calculated. They are now more likely to flee to countries ruled by their own species if available, and they will pick planets in a smarter manner. The game has now got refugee attraction. Civics like Free Haven will make more refugees show up, while allowing slavery will reduce the likelihood that people will seek refuge in your empire. Also, some of the Become the Crisis perks, specifically Cosmogenesis, they massively decrease the amount of refugees you're going to pick up. After a review of unemployment mechanics, the devs felt that they did not add significantly to the game. All unemployed pops now demote to civilian or maintenance drone at the end of the month. Boom! This is a massive boost for regular biological empires and non-Gestalt machines. They've removed the rising unemployment event chain. Now, they say they've done that. In the 4.3 open beta that I've tested, I swear I've seen this a few times still, so maybe it's still leaking around somewhere. Not sure. Living standards have been adjusted. All living standards now include information for slaves, just in case you are a crazy player that finds some crazy way of getting slaves onto unusual and unexpected standards like utopian abundance. Happiness penalties on lower living standards also now apply to civilians as well. They've removed the demotion time bonuses as they are no longer relevant. Resettlement costs are now the same across all of your strata. Since demotion is now immediate at the end of the month, this prevents an undesired element of micromanagement where you would want to fire any pops you wanted to resettle. This is a massive boost, making things easier. What I really like there is being able to use shift or control shift to move 500, 1,000, many orders of magnitude more in terms of pops than we currently can. The developers have also improved grammar for French, German, and Spanish translation of empire names for certain randomized empires. They have reverted the materialist empire being forced to use cybernetic portraits if you own the machine age. Didn't notice that was happening, but okay, that does make sense. They've renamed the mercantile and unyielding traditions to commerce and fortification to match the naming structure of all other traditions. Job automation is now moved from district to planet. This means that technician automation will apply to all technician jobs on the planet instead of only jobs granted from the generated district. This is a massive boost, by the way. This makes it very, very easy to understand what's going to happen. Field modulation, eco-stimulation, and geothermal fracking technologies are now marked as gateway technologies for rural district specialization. Improvements to the Scorch World Herald civics now mention that diplomacy with other thermophiles is, in fact, possible. I thought it already was, but it's good that they've now mentioned that. The option text for rogue servitors discovering alien life is now tonally appropriate. Apparently it was not quite thematic enough. The first robot timeline event has been blocked for machine species. That makes a lot of sense. And when multiple endgame crises are active in galaxy settings, endgame crises are now allowed to spawn 25 years after another crisis is spawned instead of being blocked while there is an active crisis. This makes it much, much, much more difficult. The economic and military reworks have already made all crises really hard, especially let's say 25 times all crisis. Adding in the fact that the endgame crises will now spawn regardless of if there is currently an active crisis, so you can't let a little pocket of the contingency survive, tech up for 10, 20, 30 years, rebuild your fleets, and then kill them to bring in the next crisis. This is going to be a lot tougher for those massive challenge runs. Now we've got the meat and potatoes for the ship and fleet rebalancing. Ship capacity usage has changed significantly. Corvettes are now 5 naval capacity, frigates are 8, destroyers 10, cruisers 20, and battleships 40. You'll notice this basically follows the old progression, except that frigates are a little bit of a weird place now. Everything's multiplied by 5, except frigates are 5 plus 3. This means you can then, of course, get, in place of 4 destroyers, 5 frigates. But frigates are now more expensive in terms of naval capacity than corvettes. Titans and Bio-Titans are 80, Juggernauts and Colossus weapons are 100. Then we've got the Bioships. Maulers are 4, then 6, then 8, depending on which stage of growth they're in. Weavers are 8, 12, then 16. Harbingers are 16, 24, and 32. And Stingers are 32, 48, and 64. This means the Bioships, I think, are at something of an advantage here in terms of nav cap, but we'll have to see how that plays out when the patch has fully been played through. Most ships, including space fauna and event ships, in general have 5 times the naval capacity usage that they used to. Nanite Swarmer ships are now size 1. That is a massive debuff to Nanite Ascended Empires. Previously, Nanite Swarmers were size 0, so you could stack an infinite number of them and they required nothing. This means they're now going to be more expensive. I wonder if nanite swarmers have no upkeep still, because if they do, then being size 1 just means that it will affect you if you have any regular ships that aren't nanite swarmers. I suppose if that is how it's implemented, this is just going to push you into using nanite swarmers with no upkeep, because, you know, plus 1000% upkeep on 0 upkeep is still going to be 0. They've increased the base and modified Vivarium capacity to work with these new numbers, and Galactic Nemesis marauding ships have 20% less navcap usage than their size would normally require. So that's 4 for corvettes, 8 for destroyers, and 16 for cruisers. They've increased the base naval capacity to 50, meaning you can field 10 corvettes before hitting your limit. They've also rebalanced the naval capacity techs. In my playthroughs, I've noticed that the late game repeatable navcap techs don't seem to have been rebalanced. They're still just plus 20. Maybe that's an oversight, or maybe late game naval capacity is not meant to increase very much. The Titan class weapons now deal area of effect damage if they successfully hit their target. This is crazy. Perdition beams now deal damage to enemy ships within a certain range of the target. Ion cannons deal less collateral damage at a shorter range than Titan perdition beams, and they've added ion cannon collateral damage to Starfire cannons. Okay, this means that you could run a fleet of, let's say, 10 Titans with Titan lances, and due to the area of effect damage, you will actually stand a chance against corvettes, or at least that's, I think, the intention with this. Yes, area of effect damage isn't that high, but it's enough to take out annoying meat shield like corvettes, where they would normally just take one shot from the perdition beam, die, but you've done over damage there by, 1,000, 2,000% and wasted most of the output of the perdition beam. Armor and shielding have also been rebalanced. Now higher tiers will also add a small amount of armor or shield hardening as appropriate. These tiers grant 1% armor or shield hardening per tier. So that means if you're at tier 5 armor, you're going to be getting 5% armor hardening. I assume on large components, medium and small, it's the same because you don't really get a choice here. This does mean late game, you don't need as much armor hardening as you used to need. You just need lots of components. And on something like a Juggernaut or a Titan, on a Juggernaut, Juggernaut's what I'm thinking of, where you've got so many shield and armor component slots, you probably don't need to add any additional hardening. You'll already have enough stacked up. Higher tier ship and component costs and upkeep have generally been increased. So larger ships, more powerful ships are going to cost you more, especially their components. They've increased the cost to build larger and higher tier ship sections and ship components. This includes the Fallen Empire ships from Cosmogenesis. One of those battleships, battle cruisers now, fully tooled out, you're looking at around 10,000 alloys. That is equivalent to one stage of a megastructure. So you can have a megastructure or you can have 4 battle cruisers. I think the megastructure costs need to be rebalanced in line with the massive changes to ship costs. Otherwise, it seems like a no-brainer that you're going to spend your alloys first on, say, a Dyson Sphere for 4,000 energy rather than, 4 battle cruisers or 8 battleships. It does seem a little bit of a no-brainer maybe. Crystal hull plating now also grants flat damage reduction. This, I think, gives crystal plating a niche again. It previously had a niche for some time, a long time ago actually, when disruptors reigned supreme, bypass weaponry reigned supreme, and you could get enough hull from crystal plating to actually counter that. Now though, it seems to have come back. So, crystal infused plating will give you -1, -2, and -3 damage per incoming shot for small, medium, and large sections. And it gives you some additional hull points, but I think the damage reduction here is what's going to be most powerful. Crystal forge plating giving you -2, -3, and -4 damage. Given the maximum damage output of a Corvette weapon is somewhere in the region of 40 or 50 per shot, I think, this means a Titan could easily stack up, 6 of these things, get a reduction of around 25 or 30 damage per shot, basically negating most of the damage output from a Corvette. Combine in the new area of effect weaponry on a perdition beam, and actually, I think this makes Titans an anti-Corvette ship, which kind of blows my mind, but yeah, there you go, amazing. They've increased the power usage of torpedoes and energy torpedoes on standard ships. Frigates are now faster and sturdier, moving at destroyer speed instead of cruiser speed. They have +1 utility and an auxiliary slot. They also use destroyer-sized reactors. Base hull for ships has been adjusted as well, so that means it's gone up. The multiplicative damage bonus for torpedoes and torpedo-like weapons gains has been reduced to 20% of their former values because ship sizes are 5 times larger. This is basically a programming shorthand here. The torpedo weaponry was entirely tied to the naval capacity usage of the ship it was firing at, or the fleet cap usage, I should say, which initially, if you ignore bioships, is the same. Because those fleet cap usage numbers have gone up from, for example, for a Corvette 1 to 5, gone up by a factor of 5, this means that reducing multiplicative damage bonus to just 20% of previously keeps it all the same. It's the same. Torpedoes have not changed, is what the boilerplate should read here. The maximum bonus has also been increased. This means that you'll get even bigger bonuses if you're fighting a Titan or a Juggernaut or Satana. Yes! They've increased the Federation and GDF fleet sizes to match the new systems. Yeah, I've noticed Federation fleets now are very, very important. I have found it in the 4.3 open beta relatively easy to get to a few thousand naval capacity for my Empire. Pushing above that has been more challenging at present than previously. I'd need a lot more planets, pushing my Empire size up massively. Getting a Federation up and running to even medium fleet contributions is another 2,000 naval capacity worth of ships, and the same again for the GDF fleet. This means if you want to fight the Crisis, I think it's really important to have a Federation, not just for those anti-crisis bonuses, but also for the 2,000 additional naval capacity. That is basically 1/5 of your total maximum naval capacity limit. So in essence here, they've gone from being, 4% of your total naval capacity limit, in essence 4 to 8%, up to 20 to 30% apiece. That is a massive, massive overhaul, making Fed and GDF fleets, as I said, much stronger. They've increased the bonus from galactic mobilization to match the new system as well. They've added nanite upkeep for nanotech ships. Okay, they've nerfed nano stuff into the ground. Oh god. So they have 1 fleet capacity and they have a nanite upkeep, meaning you can't just run an infinite number of them. Oof. Wow, yeah, nanite needed nerfing, did it? No. Space Fauna now have 10% armor and shield hardening per rarity tier for each level above common. Okay, interesting. So, at Epic, that's 40% armor and shield hardening. Yeah, I like that. I like that change. That's fun. The Crisis changes, what are they? Well, they have reduced the power of the Pretherin, Contingency, Extra Dimensional, Great Khan, Diadochi. Diadochi? What is the Diadochi Crisis? The Diadochi, isn't that the successor states of the Great Khan? What crisis do they have? What? Excuse me while I go and Google that. Okay, I've not really been able to find anything. I'm assuming what this means is that after the Great Khan dies, if the Empire splits off into the Diadochi nations are just more powerful now because they were kind of sucky before. That's what I'm assuming. Anyway, the Tempest and the Desanu fleets have all been reduced by approximately 1/3 in power. Okay, that's something. They've reduced the power of the Awakened Fallen Empire and Satana's fleets roughly by half. Wow, okay. Yeah, I must admit, I was fighting on a 2x crisis. I had a total of around, I think it was like 7,000 naval capacity, including my Fed fleet and GDF fleet. And I was struggling against a 2x crisis and an Awakened Fallen Empire. The combination together were a little touch and go for sure. Also, they've reduced the difficulty based on scaling on the Grey Tempest and the Khan, so even if you're on Grand Admiral, Grey Tempest and Khan won't be massively out of your reach. Roaming Tempest fleets may not always have a mothership on lower difficulties, though the garrison fleets are remaining unchanged. We should also note that since power per player has decreased by a larger percentage, these will make the Crisis a much greater challenge than pre-4.3. Yeah, that's definitely true, I think a 5x crisis 100 years early these days is going to be really hard. I think that's going to be a really difficult challenge to try and pull off without some zany meta builds. They've increased many sources of command limit and naval capacity, so Galactic Force Projection, War Games in Supremacy, and Better Glandular Stimulation in Behemoth Fury Crisis perk now grant command limit multipliers instead of flat values. Generally, that is good, but it's better later in the game. Early on, it's kind of worse because you're getting a bonus. It's additively added up, these multipliers, but still, you're getting a bonus based on what you currently have. Later on, as you've gained other sources of command limit, flat sources that then are getting multiplied by these multipliers, it's better than it used to be in terms of the raw numbers. Am I making sense? I hope so. The devs have reduced the fleet power, the minimum fleet power necessary to trigger the fight with the ambushing Cuthaloid down to 600. It will be a tough fight and you might lose some ships, but you usually win. 600 fleet power is around the full naval capacity, I would say, somewhere in the region of the starting corvettes, getting, say, 10 of them to have a full 50. I think that's around 600 now. The torpedo combat computers and bio combat computers, or Fauna neurochips, have been renamed to siege combat computers and also add plus 50%, plus 65%, plus 80%, and plus 100% damage versus star bases and bombardment damage. No bioships use siege combat computers, as Mauler mandibles already do a fine job of eating star bases. This is very interesting. So this basically means that if you want to get through a platform, you want to use these siege combat computers, the torpedo combat computers. That's going to help you overall. First off, torpedo is going to be better versus star bases straight up, but then getting a bonus damage included in that is cool. The Dimensional Fleet Astral Action has been adjusted to reduce general fleet sizes. This will summon a number of escorts equal to the number of astral rifts you've explored and cruisers equal to half that number rounded down, basically making the Dimensional Fleet, which is kind of a mid-game ability at best, utterly worthless. I don't think I would ever even use this anymore. Bubbles and all of the misnamed variants no longer use naval capacity. The reason for this is that if she used naval capacity, when Bubbles reached the ripe old age of 100 and grew in size, you then suddenly have to choose between killing off Bubbles, probably not what you want to do, that would be evil, or disbanding a bunch of fleets because Bubbles is taking up the naval capacity equivalent of, say, 20 corvettes or more, and that would be really, really bad. Anchorages now give plus 5 nav cap, plus 3 with Naval Logistics Office, so that's the total of 1 frigate if you have the Naval Logistics Office as well. And they have trade upkeep equal to the naval capacity upkeep that they are providing. Again, this is going to be quite a lot less. So in order to get 1 battleship, you will need to have 8 anchorages just for 1 battleship. Honestly, that's wild. That's not even possible on a fully upgraded starbase. With Naval Logistics Office and 6 anchorages, you can get to 42, which just squeaks through to 1 battleship, but that does require the Naval Logistics Office. Soldiers are now specialists, they're no longer workers, and they also have 1 alloy upkeep per 100 pops. This doesn't sound like much, right? But in order to get large numbers of fleets, we now need many, many more soldiers than previously if you want to be facing a 5 times, or dare I say it, even a 10 times crisis, which is now very, very strong. And this means you're going to be spending probably at least, 4, 5, 600 alloys a month in the mid-game, up to thousands later on in the late game, just paying for your soldier upkeep jobs. This is going to be a massive sink of alloys where we already are getting fewer alloys produced thanks to the economic nerfs from the patch overall, contributing to the lower fleet sizes you're going to see in 4.3 games. Let's now look at the economic rebalancing. So, many sources of Unity production have been reduced. That should mean it is slower to get your traditions done. They have increased the base Unity production of all empires from 5 up to 10. Many traits reducing housing have been rebalanced a bit. Colonies designations now universally add job efficiency to their appropriate jobs rather than increasing the output or reducing upkeep. This is a massive boost for research on all of your research worlds, because efficiency means you'll get plus 10% extra jobs, so that's 10% more output, yes, at the cost of 10% more goods spent on it. You'll need more consumer goods for that extra 10% research. It is worse for the basic resource outputs because you're getting, 10% instead of the 25% for technicians, miners, and farmers, so that's much, much worse. And because it's not an increase to output from jobs, this stacks less well. So actually, overall, this is a big reduction. Many sources of empire size modifiers have been reduced. The base amount of empire size generated by pops has been halved. This is especially things that reduce empire size down to 0. So basically, it is pretty much impossible now to get empire size to 0. Oh, that's what the devs think. Anyway, we'll find out. The base amount of empire size generated by colonies has been doubled from 10 up to 20. That means 3 colonies is giving you 60 empire size. So wide empires have been heavily impacted by this. This now means tall empires with lots of pops and few planets will have a lot less empire size than they did in previous patches. And wider empires, especially early in the game, if you colonize too many planets too quickly, your empire size will quickly spiral out of control and give you massive increases to tech and tradition costs with very little economic benefit. So I think we will see a reduced pace for colonization and the spread of colonies in the early and mid game if you want to keep your empire size down. Effects and modifiers that granted jobs per pop have been replaced with static job numbers. This is an economic hit to some of the planet-based modifiers that usually granted these things. They have reduced most job-based sources of research, but in exchange for this, they've reduced tech costs by half. This indirectly has massively improved space-based deposits, which at the moment are basically worthless in 4.2 and previously, like +5 science from a couple of deposits. So what? I can get that with 100 pops. Now, not so much. This is because we're getting reductions to the specialist building that increases your engineering, physics, and society. Instead, now the maximum level only adds plus 0.5. And on top of that, the research capital thing, the building, has gone down to just plus 0.5, I believe, for each type of research. So overall, research outputs are much lower, but yes, tech costs are lower too, so you don't, I think, feel this as much. Your actual income number feels lower, but your output isn't that bad, okay? I promise. The developers have also improved mineral deposits on asteroids and energy deposits on many stars, meaning that those values are more impactful now. Many buildings and modifiers that increase job output have been reduced. For example, the technologies for energy, minerals, and food that used to grant plus 20% output are now just plus 5%. It is a massive nerf to our economies. Most stability bonuses have been reduced to 1/2 to 1/3 of their previous values. The intention of this change is to make stability generally more important and harder to pin at 100, and also make things like +1 or +2 stability more valuable. Most job efficiency modifiers have been reduced, so you're getting less job efficiency. This is the reckoning, the economic reckoning, don't forget. Some production modifiers had been turned into job efficiency modifiers. Across the board, I've generally found where you used to get job production, often that's now job efficiency. And because efficiency and job output stack multiplicatively with each other, this has reduced your net outputs and increased your upkeep costs. Also, ascension situations progress much slower than they previously did. It's now going to take you quite a bit longer to biologically ascend, synthetically ascend, cybernetically ascend, psionically ascend, because the actual situation will take 15, 20, or 30 years at least to get it done. This means that getting your empire fully ascended by year 30 or year 20, as you could previously do in 4.2, is, I think, pretty much impossible. You're probably looking at year 40 to 70 in terms of finished ascension paths at this point, which pushes back the bonuses you get from ascending to much later in the game, giving an early game nerf to power. The only exception for these ascension situations is the Endbringers. Tick-tock goes the clock, and yes, the end of the cycle is still coming. More strategic resource production has been moved to the strategic resource producing district specializations, significantly reducing the amount given for free by strategic resource deposits without the specialization. Yeah, normally now it's, I think, plus 0.15 per 100 pops, unless you specialize. If you specialize, you lose output of, let's say, minerals or food, but you're gaining even more of the rare resources. I don't think this is still that impactful. You can still get plenty of rare resources from the synthetic refineries built alongside industrial districts. So yeah, I don't think this is actually going to hurt you that much. Special planetary deposits are also 4 times more common now. The devs have made some unique planetary features more interesting. Not entirely sure what that means, but I like interesting, so I'm in favor of this. Subsidy edicts have been nerfed into the goddamn ground. For example, capacity subsidies used to grant plus 50% resource output from technicians. It's now granting plus 20% job efficiency, and it will increase your trade upkeep rather than energy upkeep by 0.5 per 100 pops. That is a big hit. Basically, as you can see, across the board, numbers are going to be lower. It is not going to be as easy to get a big economy. You can't just do it really quickly. We've now got some juicy changes all about automation buildings. So, assembly patterns and construction templates are now tier 2 and tier 4 technologies. Automation buildings are now job specific and no longer increase their upkeep based on district count. Automated worker or simple drone jobs increase their upkeep by 4 energy per 100 jobs that they're doing. Specialists and complex drones are 8 energy, and elite jobs, if you can automate those, are 12 energy per 100 jobs. Fallen Empire buildings are now a planet limit of 1, and they automate 25% or 50% of relevant specialist jobs, or 75% or 100% of relevant worker jobs. This means the Fallen Empire buildings can basically fully automate your basic resource production and get you a good section of the way there with alloy jobs or researcher jobs or unity jobs, that sort of thing. There are some exceptions here. The Dimensional Replicator produces 10 of each strategic resource, and the upgraded Dimensional Fabricator produces 25 of each and 5 of each rare resource. That's nanites, dark matter, Zro, and living metal. The Sky Dome and Imperium Dome and the Shrink Space Depot and Extra Dimensional Depot are functionally the same. They still provide you with what they did before, which is housing and amenities or additional resource storage space. The devs have also adjusted the costs, upkeep, and build times of all of the Fallen Empire buildings. Fallen Empires gain 100% automated workforce efficiency. That's very strong. That basically means the 50% automated jobs they've got on specialists and the 100% on workers are now at plus 100% automation efficiency, so they count as 2 pops each. And then when they awaken, they get a bonus of plus 500% additional automated workforce efficiency for a total then of plus 600% or 700% net automated workforce efficiency. So every 1 job is 7 jobs. Wow. Polytechnic mentors have been nerfed into the ground. They now grant miners engineering research rather than unity, and the bonuses they grant have been reduced to plus 0.1. It was a brief, amazing time while it lasted when you basically could play a mineral rush to be a unity rush to ascension rush to just kind of win, but yes, those days are behind us. They've also retooled some of the bonuses the ethics give, so authoritarian ethics no longer increase worker production bonus, instead they increase worker job efficiency. Egalitarians have a reduced faction production bonus of plus 15% / plus 30% now, and the specialist production bonus has been converted to specialist job efficiency. The last change to ethics is pacifism, and they have now a reduced empire size from Pop's bonus of only -10 and -20% for regular and fanatic. This is actually a bigger nerf than you'd think for two reasons. First off, the amounts that Pops are adding to your empire size has been halved, and on top of that, you're also getting less of a reduction here from pacifism. So this is really not so great. The corporate authority now has +1 envoy instead of +1 external leader pool. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's also been some player crisis rebalancing. They've adjusted crisis currency gains across the board. Cosmogenesis and Behemoth crises should be quite a bit slower to progress than before. Nemesis will be slower to progress passively through vassal control, but much faster through direct destruction. Crisis perks that give economic bonuses now also give slight upkeep increases where appropriate. For example, in Cosmogenesis, you get a monthly output to engineering, society, physics research at each level. Depending on which level it is, it's a different science type. That also comes with an increase to researcher upkeep now. Cosmogenesis difficulty has been reworked. Fallen empires will now directly oppose your experiments, culminating in a total war once you get to stage 5. If the materialist empire is still around, there will be several warnings as well as a safer alternative path, allowing you to stop the Cosmogenesis nonsense, to get off the bandwagon and just keep the bonuses you've got, giving you an off-ramp somewhat like the hypothermia crisis path. Cybernetics Ascension has been one of the lackluster ascensions, but no longer possibly. The cybernetic traits no longer have any energy upkeep. The cybernetic and limited cybernetic trait, the specific one you get, the individual trait, not just the bonus cybernetic traits you can add on, now swap half of the base food or equivalent upkeep for energy upkeep. This is a big bonus overall, actually. They've added 2 new positive cyborg species traits for pop growth and bureaucrat output. That's very good. The metabolic reprocessing now also gives robot assembly from the augmented jobs and organic assembly from the roboticist job, massively increasing both your robot production and your monthly pop growth. The integrated anatomy no longer gives +1 organic species trait pick, but instead +1 robot species trait point and +1 robot species trait pick. Robot pop should no longer be penalized by reduction to non-cyborg pop happiness as well. Cyber hives now receive temporary buffs, +3 skill level, +25% experience gain to their nodes as well as their planets, +15% job productivity and -7.5% job upkeep whenever you are assimilating new cyborgs into your collective. Devouring swarms, on the other hand, receive these bonuses when purging instead. Overall, this doesn't sound like that much of a bonus, but I think we're about to get into the nerfs coming for specifically biological ascension, but also the machine ascension as well, that are going to be giving us quite a bit of a rebalance, no longer comfortably putting biological ascension on top as the de facto S tier ascension path. And if you're enjoying this video, please rebalance that like button. Driven assimilators now unlock additional effects on their cyborg traits for their ruler, that's -35% cyborg upkeep and +15% complex drone productivity, and governors get 20% replicator output. Augmenters now produce 1.75 engineering research, which is up from 1.5, and they make 1.75 society. Given the other nerfs we've had to sources of research income, this, I think, is actually quite a big boost. As long as you've got, the 400 augmenters on every single planet, that means you're going to be getting around, 8 to 10 of each type of research at least, except for physics, of course, from every planet. That does add up. The driven assimilator variant now provides 3 pop assembly up from 2. The regular variant instead grants robot assembly, which was already mentioned earlier. The society research output of genomic researchers and spawning drones after completing genetic ascension from 4.5 to 3.5 to bring them in line with this. That sentence didn't quite make sense. I think basically what they're saying here is genomic researchers have had their society research nerfed from 4.5 down to 3.5. The Augmentation Bazaars building from the Civic of the same name now counts as an augmentation center for the purposes of the cybernetic ascension situation, meaning you can cybernetically ascend just a little bit faster. The cybernetic species trait now provides an additional plus 5% job efficiency. That's a helpful little bonus to get. The branching out modifier from cyberization situation also gives 10% trader job efficiency. Hive minds which encounter genetic defects during cyberization can now choose a cyberization policy, and dry, wet, and cold climate mod traits for cybernetic species are now habitability traits that allow reaching up to 125% habitability. But I don't think you're getting any additional bonuses from that unless you can somehow convince another empire to genetically ascend and put mutagenic onto your habitability for that species. But that's really quite a tough little cookie to crack. As I mentioned before, I think these changes don't sound fantastic overall, but when we look at them in combination with the nerfs to biomorphosis and the other ascension paths, this does, I think, bring cybernetic closer to the other ascension paths. There are biomorphosis changes coming as well. They have switched the optimized neurology, which is purity flexible 1 tradition, and heightened attributes, which is purity flexible 2 tradition. They switched biochemical composure and / regenerative cloning, which is the cloning flexible 2 tradition, with artificial population, which is cloning flex 3. They've removed organic job efficiency bonuses from somatic subversion, which is mutation flex 2, and artificial population. Optimized neurology now gives -1 leader maximum negative trait instead of +1 effective leader level. That's quite a nerf, actually. Somatic subversiveness now grants an additional +1 effective leader level. That's helpful, I suppose. Artificial population now provides -10 empire size from vat-grown pops. That's only helpful if you've vat grown pops, though. Also, you're getting -10% empire size from heightened attributes. That's been moved to imperfection remediation. I think the general effect of the movements of some of these bonuses, especially swapping the flexible traditions, is that it will give us some harder choices, because at the moment there's definitely kind of somewhat stale meta in the picks for your biological ascension to get the best picks for each grouping. Something that has not been mentioned here, but I believe is in the 4.3 update. I could be wrong on this, but I'm fairly confident they've swapped out the bonuses you're getting from the genomic researchers, and instead now you are going to get the population growth directly from the building instead of being able to get it from stacking multiple genomic researchers and also getting the medical buildings, which would do a job swap into more genomic researchers. And that now also means you can't build a holiday resort world and take the medical worker jobs there to stack literally hundreds of pop growth either. So all of these together are massively nerfing the amount of population growth output that biomorphosis will be able to produce. Combine that with the increases cybernetic is getting, and you might start to see why I'm thinking they're actually doing quite a reasonable balance pass here. Okay, all of the non-Endbringer psionic corporate empires will now unlock the Psionic Offices branch office building. The building has been reworked to give us 200 empathic marketer jobs. Previously it added telepath jobs if the host empire was psionic. It will give crime if the branch office owner is a criminal syndicate. Only the Board of Psychics Advanced Authority will gain the +2% aura effectiveness. You'll get a base income of 5 unity, where previously it was 10 energy, plus 0.05 trade from all traders on the planet. That goes up from plus 0.15 trade from telepaths, and a hidden modifier to increase the chances the AI empire which hosts the building will take the psionic ascension by plus 10% per branch office in their empire. Empathic marketers are jobs that count as traders for most purposes, but provide you less trade output in exchange for increasing the chance to draw psionic technologies. I don't really think that's a great bonus because there aren't that many useful psionic technologies that you can actually get your hands on. They also produce a small additional amount of unity if the host empire was undergoing psionic ascension. Technocracy has received some spicy changes. You're now going to get +1 scientist cap, but -1 official cap, and of course an explanation that that starting scientist is the governor of your homeworld, pretty reasonable. And then the council position no longer reduces researcher upkeep, instead it provides cross-disciplinary research output to researchers. Basically that means you're getting research output for every type of research with a corresponding increase in upkeep. So in essence, this is more job efficiency for all of your researchers, but because it's output and an increase to upkeep rather than actual efficiency, it will stack multiplicatively with efficiency, making this all round a better and more powerful bonus than just more efficiency. Having a 0 deficit will now be quite bad for psionic empires. You'll get -75% psionic pop job efficiency, plus 50% shroud delve cost or cooldown, -15% psionic weapons damage, that is very nasty if you've got something amazing like Zro launchers, a 2% chance each month to suffer a shroud incursion, but if you do suffer one, you cannot get another one spawning for 2 more years. Shroud Forged now register as psionic pops for the has_psionic_species_trait check. I didn't know it wasn't registering for that. I don't know exactly what that does. That sounds like something more to do with modders, but basically, apparently previously Shroud Forged Empires, Shroud Forged pops didn't actually count as psionic maybe at the start of the game. Imperial Legion armies are no longer limited, so if you get the Imperial Legions, you get your Sardaukar, you can have as many of them as you damn well please. Tankbound has had, I think, some pretty big nerfs if we include also the changes to automated workforce that have come in. The -25% upkeep from Tankbound civics now applies to automated workforce instead of all jobs. That's a nerf. Infernal Tankbound now begin with 3 additional generator districts, which is good. Other Tankbound empires will now convert 1 less farm into a generator. They have removed the 30% automated workforce penalty that Tankbound start with. They no longer begin with insights on assembly patterns, as it is no longer needed to negate the penalty that they don't have. Assembly patterns and construction templates instead give plus 10% automation efficiency if you're Tankbound. Tankbound production overseers generate 2 engineering research instead of unity and grant 2% efficiency and plus 200 amenities. They are only granted by urban districts or as a clerk slot, so I guess if you've got ring worlds. Overall, I think the upkeep reduction going away is going to be quite negative actually, and also on top of that, the changes to automation are not so great. I mean, getting more efficiency could make them useful, but the energy costs in production now, I think, might end up being quite expensive. Habitats. Habitat dwellers can now build rare crystal extraction specializations in their mining districts. I didn't know they couldn't do that. And both exotic gas and volatile mote extraction specializations in reactor districts. This makes sense. That's a good bonus to get because they should have been able to do this anyway. Habitat capital buildings now provide hunter-seeker drone jobs for machine intelligences and hive minds, but they no longer provide logistic drones for machine intelligences. That's mainly just a minor balance change overall there, I think. They've reworked oppressive autocracy to swap enforcers and telepaths into the elite strata instead of granting them a special exception as specialists. The specialist training tradition now grants plus 2% specialist job efficiency per planetary governor level. However, later on in this patch notes, you'll notice that that actually isn't the case. They've then replaced this again. This is a tradition that's in the aptitude tree, and honestly, it would be fantastic if it was plus 2% efficiency per level of your governors. It isn't that though, it's just a flat 10% specialist or complex drone job efficiency. That's also good, but just not quite as good as the 2% per level that they previously had, just for a little bit. The devs have also rebalanced some of the luminary leader traits. That is the leader trait you get for under 1 rule. Pious Ascetic now scales from plus 0.1 to plus 0.3 Society of Research from bureaucrats. Previously it was plus 0.5 to plus 2, so that's a massive nerf. High King now scales from plus 10 to plus 30% job efficiency for elites. Previously it was resources from jobs. That is in essence a nerf because of this overall shift to job efficiency rather than being able to get some of both categories and make it multiplicative. Enlightened Ruler now scales from minus 2.5 to minus 10% job upkeep. Previously it was minus 5 to minus 20%, so that's actually quite a big slap in the face. They've adjusted many planetary automation scripts. There is a known issue. The devs are aware that planetary automation is not building enough districts. Honestly, at the moment, I actually don't think I'd recommend using planetary automation that often. It is okay to build things manually, I found, in the current patch. I kind of prefer that to planetary automation. With the 4.0 rework, it's been a little balked for a while, and I've switched over from using it, even for kind of energy worlds, just not using it for basic things at all, really. It's easier to just DIY it yourself, leave the planet set up in the mid to late game, and then basically never come back to it. Specimens that grant stability now grant +1 stability per rarity level, so that's up to a maximum, I think, +4, or maybe it's +5. The rarity of the Spirit of the Unshackled specimen has been increased to exceptional, and the Manifesti Social Commentary Piece specimen now increases faction output. It reduces deviancy by a small amount if you're a Gestalt. They've adjusted the amount of utility slots on the Deep Space Citadel from 8 per tier to 6 per tier. That is quite a decrease, actually. That means you're going to have fewer shields and fewer armor, but given that shields and armor now produce shield hardening and armor hardening, overall this is still going to be a buff for those Deep Space Citadels. The Unifier leader trait now produces +15% unity output instead of +25%. That's also been fixed in the tooltip. So as you can see, again, economic nerfs just kind of across the board. Everything that used to produce a bit more now produces a bit less. I think what is important to remember with this is that power is always relative, okay? So as long as they are nerfing everything across the board, you can really think of it as just a numerical numbers update in a lot of ways. You know, if every single empire, if everyone is being nerfed, then kind of no one is. And I think there are some reasonable balance changes they're going to be doing as well within this scope, where they've nerfed certain things that were too powerful, like biological ascensions, a bit more than other things, like cybernetic ascension, which has actually, I think, been overall buffed. Synthetic fertility. Let's look at the changes here to this origin. So, you no longer start with the admin AI, self-aware logic, and sapient AI technologies. These grant 5% research output, but give you 5% more researcher upkeep. Instead, you get the admin AI tech with some progress at the game start, rather than fully researched. And then you're also going to be getting, every time you unlock one of these techs, an increase to the output of the identity repository. To make up for this, the base output of the repository has been reduced, but the total output with all of the technologies researched will be slightly higher than before. This does mean you're going to be a little bit weaker early game, and then by the mid to late game, when the identity repository isn't really that useful, it will be overall stronger, but yeah, it's again not that useful. The Origin now also comes with +15% computing research speed. Wow, okay, that's pretty good. And an increased draw chance for the aforementioned technologies. The rate at which pops die out has been halved from 30 down to 15, giving you more time and a larger runway to complete this synthetic ascension. And synth fertility now starts with powered exoskeletons, so the first tech you'll need to get is robots, not powered exoskeletons, reducing the number of techs you need, but given you'll be having a lower tech income, I'm assuming you'll need those additional months from a lower pop die-off rate. The devs have retooled mutagenic spars to be less exploitable and a better match with the theme of the civics. Mutagenic spars no longer scale with the number of districts, and they don't provide pop growth or assembly. The Civic now grants the governor of a planet with mutagenic spars the Substance Abuser trait. The building now provides -10% to both the habitability ceiling and floor of the planet they are constructed on. They do provide 200 jobs, and this is quite a good one, +3 effective leader level for any governors of the planet if they are substance abusers. So if you like your substances, you'll want to sit in your substance-filled spa and enjoy yourself. And if you do that, you'll be more effective at your job somehow. You know, because crackheads on crack are always better than crackheads off crack, I suppose. Anywho, that was a bit of a dark one. The jobs increase the job efficiency of ruler strata, or equivalent, and provide some amenities. Rogue servitors gain a special variant of mutagenic spars for their biotrophies instead of the normal machine lubrication basins. Non-corporate spar attendants now produce 500 amenities, where it was 100 before. Corporate spar attendants now provide 2 trade, I think that's per 100 pops, or yeah, something like that. And spar attendants for the worker co-op buff the union stewards. Mutagenic spar counselors now increase the number of spar attendant jobs. This effect is amplified if the mutagenic spar counselor is a substance abuser. So it's all about substance abuse. Love it. Mutagenic spars can now be placed in research or Unity district specializations. There are increased bonuses from food processing, mineral purification, and energy grid buildings. This is relative to the previous 4.3 numbers overall though, so you are getting less output in patch 4.3 for the food, mineral, and energy buildings that usually added +2 at the top level. It's now plus 0.5 and +1, which is still good. Previously in the 4.3 open beta, it was plus 0.25 and plus 0.5. Those numbers were too low to often make the building really that worthwhile, especially if you didn't have many other multiplicative bonuses that you could stack on, or to output or efficiency, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's at a better place right now, but it's still hard to get resources. We are definitely in the resource apocalypse or reckoning. Experimentation sentencing has been updated. The chambers now provide a static number of experiment engineer jobs and a scaling number of test subjects depending on the building tier. The number of test subject jobs is increased by 50% on penal colonies, but this means it does not scale with the population of the planet, I think. Which does mean now you can't get infinite research or near infinite research by having ridiculous levels of population on a penal colony planet. The devs have rebalanced the amount of research experiment engineers produce per crime on the planet. The bug in which the modifiers considered the uncapped crime on the colony has also been fixed, so it's capped at 100 crime that it can evaluate. Consumer goods upkeep of experiment engineers now also increase with crime, so if you're getting more output, you have more upkeep. Orderlies no longer reduce housing requirements on the planet. Fair enough, so they can't have an infinite number. And they now increase the job efficiency of experiment engineers and test subjects, not their output. Okay, sorry. So it was the orderlies providing that infinite bonus or near infinite. This is still very good, except because it's not output, you will need more upkeep. So you will need, if you have an infinite number of orderlies, you will need an infinite number of consumer goods and other such inputs. So that does, in a lot of ways, stop you getting the infinite or near infinite, asymptotically approaching infinite amount of output. The devs have halved the effect on workers and slaves of the ruthless developer trait. Okay. Unified traits no longer scale with leader level. Yes, they previously scaled with leader level. This now makes them kind of sucky. It's just like plus 10% Unity output. It's all right. It's better than nothing, but it's much worse than it used to be, where you could, for example, have a level 10 leader and they would give you plus 100% Unity output. That was great. They are, of course, reducing the economy and economic outputs of our nations. They have reduced happiness from social welfare, so your citizens aren't as happy under socialism, and they've reduced the Unity from civilians under socialism. Star-based buildings have had some changes, so the Off-World Trading Company now grants +4 trade per trade hub module, where previously it was 2. This makes it a lot better. So now, if you had 6 trade hubs, you're going to be getting an additional 24 trade rather than 12 trade. The Starbase Building Hyperlane Registrar now grants +2 trade per trade hub module. Ooh, that's cool. Whereas before it was a non-scaling, just +2 trade. Okay, wow, okay. And it also adds the subspace amplifier aura to the starbase, which is -40% hyperlane and jump drive cooldown, so your ships will fly through faster. Okay, so that actually does possibly make it a bit more worthwhile for the 3rd or 4th slot on some starbases where you're kind of umming and ahhing about what that 3rd or 4th slot should be. The devs have said adopting partial virtuality by undergoing synthetic ascension as an organic, lithoid, or infernal species no longer gives you -90% housing. Boo. Boo hiss. I don't see why they needed to take that out. That was perfectly fine. The computation core focus policies now grant 2.5% job efficiency per 100 roboticists or identity designers instead of 0.5% per 100 civilians. That's a massive nerf. Because getting on the civilians was much easier. We're very capped in terms of roboticist and identity designer numbers. The devs have adjusted the scaling of event-spawned pirate fleets to be more reasonable for the 4.3 numbers. The mercenary and mind warden enclaves now require 100 naval capacity in the fleet rather than 50. That overall actually is a reduction in ship count. Previously you needed 50 corvettes, now you just need 20. or 10 destroyers. So that is quite a lot less, quite a large number fewer than previously needed. The Crisis Beacon espionage operation now looks for larger fleets than before. Okay, didn't know that it wasn't. What does that mean? Does that mean it needs larger crisis fleets that it's looking for? I assume so. That's probably good because it makes it more powerful. The capital productivity tax have been reduced to just plus 5% efficiency per tier. That's down from 10% per tier, so the top level is plus 30% now. The devs have adjusted ship sizes for Cosmogenesis bioships and Hive Fallen Empire bioships. They've also made the distribute living metal decision cost 250 living metal, before it was 700, so it's cheaper, but grant plus 10% infrastructure build speed and minus 10% infrastructure cost and upkeep for 5 years, whereas before it was plus 10% infrastructure build speed and minus 20% job upkeep for 5 years. We are now basically just over halfway through the balance parts of these patch notes. I'm not kidding you. This is a massive patch. The devs have decreased the research and upkeep on rural jobs provided by the natural neural network. I don't even think I know what that means anymore. The aptitude tradition tree has massively changed, and it's possibly usable now. The main bonus here is specialist training, granting 10% specialist or complex drone job efficiency. The aptitude adoption effects are unchanged. That's plus 1 leader trait option and leadership conditioning agenda, which honestly sucks. Except it now grants you 5% leader XP when started and 20% upon completion, whereas before it was 10 and 10. Overall, leadership conditioning still sucks. Sharing 3000 XP, which is bugger all, with all of your leaders, that's nothing. I mean, honestly, it's nothing. You're getting more out of just finishing a tradition with statecraft. Why would you even care about this except for the trigger of statecraft? It's ridiculous. It needs to be buffed. The Empire Needs You gives you minus 25% leader cost and plus 1 recruitable leaders per class now. Psychological profiling now is leader maximum negative traits minus 1 and plus 1 leader cap for each class. Healthcare programs is plus 10% leader lifespan and minus 20% leader upkeep. Champions of Empire now gives you plus 1 effective leader skill level, that's a good bonus. And the finisher is plus 1 leader starting traits, which was previously part of Champions of Empire. Overall, the main reason I'd probably take this is for the 10% specialist job efficiency and the plus 1 effective skill level. Outside of that, yeah. Oh, the trait options. Plus 1 leader trait starting traits and trait options could be good if you roll good leaders, With statecraft, this becomes a little bit more playable, but it's still C tier, bottom of B tier, top of C tier at best. The appropriation tradition now gives plus 25% auto resettlement chance and has an appropriate flavor swap for egalitarians. Trickle up economics now increases trade from living standards. Slaves in the slave market now cost trade rather than energy, pretty much ending the energy trading supremacy of the past and moving everything over to being all about trade. Because we've got it with the edicts. The market obviously is trade-based, and now the slave market as well. Cybernetic Creed has had some changes. This is the origin that lets you basically play as the Mechanicum or the Adeptus Mechanicus, depending on your point of view and your timeline. Cybernetic Creeds are now allowed to be egalitarian. The Spiritualist factions no longer care about robots. The augmentations of the Fellowship now give job efficiency to metallurgists, artisans, and bureaucrats. This is, of course, rather than job output. The augmentations of the Templars now gives 10% job efficiency to soldiers and bureaucrats, and 10% to both army damage and health. Augmentations of the Choir gives it to researchers and bureaucrats, that's job efficiency, and augmentations of the Commune gives job efficiency to workers and bureaucrats. Ritualistic Implants gives you 5% job efficiency to metallurgists, engineers, bureaucrats, soldiers, and workers, and plus 5% army damage. So as you can see, this is a swap over to job efficiency pretty much across the board. When combined with Media Conglomerate, the United Creeds will continue to produce unity instead of trade. Cybernetic Creed factions now also produce either minerals, alloys, consumer goods, or engineering research. The Unified Creeds produce additional unity as well. The Cybernetic Creed Advanced Authorities now have differentiated modifiers. I think that overall this means that it's no longer broken. The Origin isn't broken, it's playable, and they switched it over to the new fancy numbers. It's not really a massive buff or debuff. Well, it is a debuff, but it's not a debuff relative to everything else because everything is pretty much getting the same treatment here. The Mind Wardens, if they reject Psionic Heresy, they'll be allowed to access the Shroud Inoculation Living Standard. Ooh. Okay. I don't know what that living standard does. I've tried to look it up and I've actually found nothing. So, okay, I'm excited to find out more. Distinguished Admiralty now grants plus 20% command limit instead of a flat amount. Overall, this is definitely better because in the long run, you will get more command limit from this. Yes, in the early game it's less, but later, this is much, much more. They've increased the naval cat repeatable tech to plus 20. Honestly, I think that's too low. Earlier in the game, you're getting around, I think, plus 50. So when it drops off to plus 20, it just feels bad. And it almost feels like, what's the point? Every 2 naval repeatable techs, and I think you can only do 5 of them anyway, is 1 battleship. That's 2.5 extra battleships. I mean, come on. That's crap, right? The Crisis has been updated, obviously, but there are adjusted endgame Crisis powers relative to difficulty settings. They've tuned Crisis strength scaling when allowing all endgame Crisis to spawn. They've reduced the chances of Satana spawning whilst another Crisis is active. The initial Unbidden Fleet is now stronger to help them survive unfortunate spawning choices. That's not so good for us, actually. Having bigger starting fleets, for the Unbidden at least, is somewhat terrifying. I've often waited for them to leave their home, then jumped on the gateway that they've got, the wormhole to another dimension, while they have no other anchors, and wiped them out that way, then dealt with the fleets later. Not so good for us that they've made them stronger now. Aristocratic Elite gives plus 10% elite job efficiency and plus 10% leader upkeep. Interesting. That is just an extra bonus out of the blue, I think. Police State grants 10% Enforcer job efficiency. The Council position has changed from 5% governing ethics attraction per level to 2%, but also a 1% Enforcer job efficiency. I still think that's a bit trash. I mean, overall, Police State is pretty trash. The only kind of redeeming feature here is the the stability, I should say, not the unity. The redeeming feature is the stability, and if you're pairing it with Oppressive Autocracy, you are getting a little bit of a bonus as well there. Lithoid empires start with 1 additional mining district. Martial law, i.e. setting a commander as the governor of a planet or sector, now also directly increases stability on any planet they control, not just if it's their home planet. I think that's a good thematic change. They've changed the scaling of Imperious architecture, increased the maximum damage scaling for weapons that increase damage based on target ship size. We've already covered that though. Reduced the effect that counselor skill levels have on agenda speed. I don't like this as much actually, but it does mean later in the game you won't be just zipping through all your agendas and having nothing left to do. So yeah, okay. Loyalty circuits have been replaced by compliance filters as an auto-modding trait. This means augmentation bazaars can pick it on game start. The Augmentation Center can now provide 400 jobs for driven assimilators, like others. Augmented jobs for regular empires now provide flat bonus pop growth, not a multiplier to existing pop growth. That is an additional bonus here for cybernetically ascended empires. As I mentioned, Cyber Ascension has been buffed by this update, and I'm definitely a fan of that. I'd like to play more Cybernetic Ascension. The Eater of Worlds is facing significant changes. This is not just to their Covenant powers, but also to the aura. So the Doom power for the Eater of Worlds no longer immediately starts a war. I don't even think it gives you a total war goal. Instead, what it's going to be doing is giving you Doom of the Eater fleets. Now, how do we get those and how many ships do we get? Well, the aura intensification of the Eater of the Worlds no longer summons ships from nothing. The aura intensification now increments your Doom intensity. So the more aura you're getting, the more you're maxing out your aura, the more intensity you're going to get for your Doom power. Then, when you summon a fleet, you'll get between 3 and 6 intensity, just escorts, the teeth. If you summon a fleet between 6 and 12, you'll get teeth and fangs. And at 12 or higher, you'll get teeth, fangs, and tusks. That is escorts, cruisers, and battleships. The maximum intensity is at 50. Once you get to that level, there's no point in going any higher. You might as well summon the fleet. Now, this is not a fleet you can keep around forever though, because every time you use the Doom power, every time you manifest a new fleet, it instantly dismisses the old fleet. The fleet will appear in orbit of any planet with a Sanctum of the Eater, or if one doesn't exist, it appears above your capital. Basically, this is a big nerf overall. So first off, we're losing those lovely escort fleets, the Teeth fleets, I think, that we used to get again and again and again, that would spawn every time we hit our aura cap. That is probably because we are getting the economic and fleet rebalancing. That's the theme of the patch. And instead of that, we're now getting a single fleet that could be very large if we let the intensity get up to 50, but still just the one fleet. And no longer can we do a total war. I think this is a real slap in the face to Eater of Worlds that I don't think particularly needed a slap in the face. Void Worms will be less likely to attack a planet with fewer than 1,000 pops. The Necrophage origin is also facing some changes, so Necrophage Chambers of Elevation now block pop growth for Necrophage species. The Necrophyte Apprentice jobs now boost the pop growth of all non-Necrophage species on the same planet by a small amount. These changes overall mean that the pop growth weirdness of the origin should be entirely gone, and planets with Necrophyte Apprentices should retain a high rate of growth of the secondary species, with the once per decade rituals mass converting pops over into the primary species. So in essence, this is all about rebalancing the origin so it fits in line with the original vision that the devs had. When playing a hive-minded necrophage, the Forspawn pre-FTL empires are no longer hive-minded. That's partly because they don't need to be. At the moment now, if you take over a planet with hive-minded pops on as a regular empire or vice versa, you can now set species rights standards that basically enable them to be slaves or workers within your empire, disconnected drones if you're a hive, if you're not a hive, if you get a hive, and that sort of thing. Entropy Drinkers has taken a real kick in the teeth, so the devs have replaced the scaling of empire-wide energy credit production from the Civic, and that used to grant us some monthly energy credit production per 100 pops. It's now just energy credits per 100 psionic pops of just plus 0.5. Meh. Honestly, meh. This is a tiny, infinitesimal energy output from your pops, rather than monthly energy credit production, which you could stack with your actual energy credit to get a multiplicative bonus empire-wide to get massive energy output. It's been nerfed into the floor. It really sucks. I'm not even sure Entropy Drinkers is worth taking now without that bonus. Taking any non-psionic ascension path now blocks you from reforming into Entropy Drinkers, since starting with a Civic locks you into psionic ascension. And on top of that, the Counselor position now gives you 3% additional leader experience gain per level. Chosen Civics now give 10% unity at 1,000 attunement points rather than 50%, which is a big nerf. Modifiers for rural jobs from storm relief centers have been halved, and the scrapping robots during an alloy deficit now just gives 1 alloy per pop instead of 100 alloys per pop. Yeah, previously it was possible to basically start off with robots at the start of the game with the origin, go negative onto alloys, then force a bunch of robots to be scrapped in a deficit event situation, and then end up with literally thousands upon thousands of alloys, allowing you to build a massive fleet and just ruffle stomp a neighbor. That stopped though, we're all good again. Regular empires can no longer psionically awaken robots. That's a shame, I didn't even know they could, but fair enough. A mysterious ghost district no longer sometimes appears in the UI for the Synaptic Lathe. Good. The interloper in pre-FTL shattered ring systems can now be removed, meaning you can finally make a full and complete ring world. Huzzah! Resettlement costs are now entirely the same across the board, no matter the strata of the pop. Some slaves no longer benefit from job efficiency bonuses twice. Previously there has been an issue, I suppose, where you could get a bonus from being a worker and a bonus from being a slave. Now that's gone and taken away some of the benefits of slavery. The developers have fixed the tooltip for Battle Thrall slavery type. This is the slavery where your slaves can actually fight in the army and become soldiers, and that's also getting the soldier job. Now it's clarified that in order to get military service, you need to be battle thralls, and those battle thralls need to be soldiers. And that is taking these soldier jobs, so that kind of makes sense, I suppose. The rampaging trees no longer continue to kill everyone after they have in fact been defeated. I feel this is a bug fix more than a balance fix, but fair enough. The Scorched World Heralds cannot grant full citizenship or resident status to conquered non-thermophile pops. Yeah, that's a bug, they should have been purging those. They have reduced the number of utility slots on star bases and deep space citadels. Deep space citadels now have the armor and hull matching normal star holds, star fortresses, and citadels, plus innate shields equal to their armor, so that's quite a good boost for shielding. There have also been some ground combat changes. This isn't a great ground combat rework by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a change. They have generally reduced the army count and effects that grant extra defensive armies, so there should be fewer circles on your planets. Many weapon and defensive technologies now also improve army health or damage. Subdermal stimulation increases army morale, and actually there's a bunch of these. For example, the technology that grants you the chemical living standards now gives you a bonus to, I think, army morale. Powered exoskeletons, that's the prerequisite to robotic technology, now grants a higher bonus to army damage. It has replaced worker production bonus with a larger bonus to worker and simple drone job efficiency. Yeah, I think that's now granting a 10% job efficiency bonus rather than a 5% worker production bonus. Integrated cybernetics, the technology required to take cybernetic ascension, now also grants bonuses to army damage and health. Psionic theory now grants a reduction to army morale damage taken. That's an interesting one. The devs have slightly increased orbital bombardment damage, so bombarding is easier. They have removed gestation worlds for cybernetically ascended hive mind empires. Cybernetic traditions now grant access to augmentation centers for driven assimilators, providing augmenter drones. These jobs provide amenities and organic pop growth for cyborgs, basically the same as normal augmenters. I think this is a big shame, actually. Having driven assimilators who go cybernetic ascension getting access to gestation worlds, I think, was an awesome little thing that was in the game. I don't think it needed to be nerfed. I'm sad they've done that. Branch offices now cost trade to establish instead of energy. That makes a lot of sense. They have, as I mentioned earlier, gotten rid of basically everywhere where you're using energy to buy something, and now you're buying it with trade. The only exception to that seems to be the Caravaneers that still take energy when they should really be taking trade. Imperious architecture or synaptic extensions now grants additional housing and jobs to capital buildings, scaling with the tier of the capital. This is for the domination tradition, as one of the options in there. Volcanic worlds are now less common than other habitable planet classes, so you shouldn't see them as much. They have replaced the increased naval capacity for artificial ships for Beastmaster empires with increased cost and upkeep. And last on this page, the devs have reduced the power of pirate fleets. I believe that's pirates spawned through the event and not marauders. Driven assimilators will now be starting with 2,000 cyborg pops instead of the 1,000 previously. However, they of course start with 1,000 fewer machines. This means they've got more cyborgs and less robots. Overall, I think that's a reasonable direction to go in. So that is a starting population of 2,000 cyborgs and I think 2,800 machines. The animator of Clay's interaction that spawns pops for Shroud-forged empires now only spawns pops on planets with a Shroud Touch region or a Zroni Equilibrator. That's a unique building you get if you take the Shroud-forged origin, I'm pretty confident. The cost has also been changed from a flat 500 Zro to 250 Zro per colony targeted. Eternal Vigilance once again no longer creates free defense platforms. The age of Eternal Vigilance being a powerhouse is over. The time of fleets has come again. The devs have added a plus 20% home territory ship fire rate. That's actually really good because that even buffs our regular ships, I suppose. The rationale here is that in the current environment, the free defense platforms were too strong. The Ascension perk also created an undesirable trap for players that were not ready for the economic impact the upkeep of a huge number of defense platforms would create. You know, I think this could have been rebalanced to maybe give a new defense platform every 2 years, or maybe every year or something, and possibly it only gives out 25% instead of 100%, or maybe it gives out 20%, you know, so you're going to get a few free platforms and not that many overall. But yeah, the issue with economics, I suppose, could be argued. I think this is a mean nerf, because we went from Eternal Vigilance being fun and exciting to being kind of boring, actually, and I don't think things should be boring. That sucks. The devs have reduced the scaling on primal calling stance modifiers by a factor of 5 to match the increase in vivarium capacity, so that basically is, in essence, no change whatsoever. The integrated weaponry, delicate frames, juiced power, hollow bones, and cyber commando traits, which are cybernetic traits, now affect job efficiency for soldier jobs. Fortune tellers no longer produce additional trade. Oh, that's such a shame. The Machine Intelligence Ruler now grants -1% empire size from pops and plus 500 amenities on each colony per level. Previously it was just -3% empire size from pops per level. Overall, because the empire size from pops has already been halved, this, I think, is just a straight up bonus. Those additional amenities are really, really good for a Machine Intelligence Gestalt Ruler. The devs have buffed museum curators slightly. At the moment they kind of suck and you wouldn't normally run them. They've also added the historic reenactor job swap when combined with warrior culture. Oh my goodness me, we can have historic reenactors? Oh, I love that. Okay. The energy cost and upkeep of private colony ships has been replaced with trade. Again, replacing energy with trade cost, it makes sense. The devs have also nerfed the replication hub and spawning nest district specializations, so that there can be less pop growth. That is, again, an economic nerf, because pops, the more pops we have, at least, the bigger our economy is, and the embiggening needed to end. Alright, we're over 85 minutes through this video. I'm going to put a little secret call out in. If you're still watching at this point, and you're actually paying attention and you're enjoying it, please let me know by leaving a comment. The secret call out word for today that I'd like you to use in your comment is uplift. Please use uplift somewhere in your comment, or a derivation or a conjugation of that word if it's even possible. Just let me know that you've hit this secret call out. There has been an additional balance pass on all of the origins, separate feature branch from the other balancing apparently. The survivor species trait from the post-apocalyptic origin now also grants a reduction to housing and amenities usage. I think that's reasonable. Post-apocalyptic is really a hit and miss origin. If you don't find any worlds that are tomb worlds, or you're not directly trying to make tomb worlds, it's kind of just a little bit of flavor and otherwise useless after the start of the game. The colonial spirit modifier from the Lost Colony origin now grants 10% pop growth, or assembly as appropriate, as an additional bonus. The Storm Chaser origin can no longer build storm shelters, but will instead benefit from their effects via the capital building as soon as they research the related technology. That's actually better, so you don't even have to build the building or use the slot. You just get access to the storm shelter effect on your capital building when you have the tech. It also, now that the origin grants -15% devastation from storms and -10% ship damage in storms. So if you're in a storm, you take 10% less damage. Nice. Storm shelters are now slightly more effective, negating 30 or 45% of economic penalties instead of 25 or 40%. Storm negation technology now reduces negative effects on ships by 45% per tier instead of 50%, thus capping at 90% protection in most cases. That is a big nerf, so now everyone in the late game will actually suffer a little bit from storms. The Slingshot to the Star origin also now provides a 15% cost reduction for outposts. This does not apply to influence cost, so this does give you finally an alloy cost reduction, which I think is kind of reasonable. The devs have made bureaucrats much better, and all of their equivalents like priests, by slightly increasing their base unity output. This has to be examined in combination with the fact that faction unity output has gone down, and I believe trade unity output has gone down as well, because trade output, I think, has gone down too. So this makes the bureaucrats the most efficient way of producing unity now, better than trying to get unity from trade or early faction bonuses. Building priests or bureaucrats is the way forwards. Having said that, the devs have, of course, made ascensions take a lot longer. So actually, you do want to ascend as quickly as possible, but you're not going to get that early power spike at year kind of 20, 30, or 40 anymore. It's going to be more like 40, 50, or 60. Thermotechnic mentors have been rebalanced. They no longer add additional output to other jobs, but produce their own instead. This output scales with the amount of employed jobs per 100 pops, but is capped at 4,000 jobs per category. Yeah, this is basically just a massive nerf. Thermotechnic mentors, in essence, kind of suck now, honestly. They used to be amazing, but they suck. They no longer count as bureaucrats either, but they are their own job category, which is very important for job modifiers, making them, again, suck more. Council position Thermal Engineer now reduces the upkeep of Thermotechnic mentors by 2%. The Obsessional Directive now grants plus 15% artisan drone job efficiency and increased consumer goods storage. The Commodities Consolidation Situation now grants artisan drone job efficiency and adds Unity production to artisans instead of all Unity. So that's just Unity production to artisans rather than a bonus to monthly Unity, I think is the change there. The subterranean contact zone you can get from meeting some subterranean people below one of your colonies now provides job swaps for traders or logistic drones. Oh, that's quite cool. So actually you can get more subterranean contacts by making this a trade world, which would be thematic. I think that's good. The devs have removed inappropriate researcher jobs from planetary features which provided them. A lot of planetary features gave out randomly like 200 researcher jobs of a certain type, biologists, physicists, engineers. It was funny, it was weird, we're going to move on. The bonuses for the Genesis Guide Civics have been readjusted. They've halved the modifiers from the Genesis Preserves to make them less powerful. They've added an on action to remove the preserves if you reform your government, so they will go away, which is important. They've reduced the rewards from colonizing from 500 Unity and 25 influence down to 250 Unity and 5 influence. And they've reduced the rewards from uplifting from 1000 Unity down to just 250 Unity and 5 influence, making this very, very kind of crappy in terms of Unity output. The devs have ensured that a Genesis Preserve is created only if one does not already exist. Unity from jobs modifier from the Genesis Monument has been decreased to 10% if you don't have the Civic. The devs have updated various checks to check for all variants of the Civic instead of just the version for regular individualistic empires. And they've set the strata for newly spawned pre-sapients to actually be pre-sapient instead of no category, because that can lead to some silly issues where you'll end up with a pre-sapient working a job like, say, for example, a civilian artisan job. The Nano Corpses deposit now yields alloys, not rare crystals. The Mountain in the Sky deposit from the Gravity Storm has been rebalanced, but allows construction of a unique district specialization. The Aquaculture District Specialization provides 50 jobs of each type, not 75. Anglers no longer produce additional food. This is a big nerf to anglers, in fact, actually. This means that anglers now will be producing the same amount of food as a farmer, and you will get fewer farmer equivalent jobs per food district. And that's because half of the jobs are given over to pearl divers. Anglers and pearl divers are now swapped on wet worlds regardless of district specializations. Factions have 50% reduced output during the first 10 years of the game, when factions normally do not exist. This is a massive nerf to Parliamentary System, basically. Parliamentary System now grants plus 20% faction output, so that's a reduction there, but also now has a plus 50% disapproval for unmet demands, making your factions just that little bit harder to actually make happy. Media Conglomerate now gives early access to factions, so they've given the corporate empires early access to Parliamentary System, basically, but it replaces faction Unity output with trade output. Yes, okay, so you get trade instead of Unity. If you go mercantile, you can then convert that trade back into Unity anyway, but hey ho. Civics that provide politician job swaps, such as technocracy, merchant guilds, and exalted priesthoods, now provide additional jobs to relevant buildings. It looks like they're kind of getting rid of the job swaps, it seems. Overtuned Origin no longer has early access to genetic ascension. That's pretty reasonable. It was silly that it got that anyway. The bonus pop growth and amenities provided by genomic researcher jobs from selecting cloning traditions and choices during biomorphosis have been moved to the genomic research facility building. The amount of amenities granted has been increased to 500. The devs have rebalanced all council positions that give flat resources to jobs, so they, I think, now give efficiency or give far less in terms of resources to jobs. This is all more economic nerfing. And that job reduction, basically, that you're getting for genomic researchers when you're selecting cloning traditions is massive, okay? The fact that you're no longer getting bonus pop growth from genomic researchers, but instead getting it from the building, is a very large reduction in your total pop growth. The Dark Consortium Civic now has a beefier dark matter deposit on game start, which is basically a big buff for them. There has been a pass on edicts. Many now affect efficiency. I swear we've looked over this once before, but here it is again. Knights are now considered soldiers instead of bureaucrats and researchers. Strong, very strong, and weak now also affect soldier efficiency. Okay, so actually they'll buff your knights. They've adjusted the effects of commander and scientist governors to change them up just a little bit. Battle thralls now get a bonus to soldier efficiency. Disruptors are changing. This is actually something I spoke to Aladra in the game director about last year in, I want to say, November. And in essence, this comes from an idea or a couple of ideas that have popped out of the multiplayer community on my server, amongst others. And that is that disruptors are just far too strong, and instead they should be kind of getting better the higher up you get them in tier. So disruptors now start with 50% shield and armor bypass at tier 1, which increases with each tier up to 80% shield and armor bypass when you get to psionic disruptors. They now also give you 25% additional damage against shields. In essence, when we combine this with the fact that you're getting a little bit of armor and shield hardening from all of your shield components, especially at the higher tiers, it should mean disruptors are now more of a balanced weapon rather than being overwhelming. In fact, this might have been overtooled. They might need to walk this back a little bit. It might make disruptors crap again, but it's a fine balance to end up on. There has been increased Unity production and consumer goods upkeep for politicians. The Commander starting level Civic has been swapped, so Commander experience gain for Commander upkeep reduction on Distinguished Admiralty, and they've added Commander upkeep reduction to Warbots and Strength of Legions. The Machine Capital building at Tier 2 or higher now also grants coordinated jobs. They've reduced the power of Council positions for chosen civics, and the clustered capacity, aka virtuality, now gives plus 75% pop job efficiency rather than 150%, but only has minus 10% per colony rather than minus 25%. I say only 150% was the top level. That's because with the first colony you're ending up at minus 25% straight away, so you're getting that plus 150. Okay, the devs have also rebalanced a load of species traits. Either they've reduced job efficiency, so for erudite, fertile, vat grown, there have been from reductions here because number was too big, reducing pop growth speed, reducing research job efficiency, reducing organic pop assembly. Existential ito parity has reduced pop growth speed because number was too big. Numistic administration reducing trader job efficiency. Dark matter engines being halved. That is a massive, massive nerf to modular ascension. Going from 40% job efficiency on dark matter engines down to 20%, yikes. Plus, they've increased the upkeep from 0.02 dark matter per 100 pops to 0.03. That's a 50% increase, which does also make the cost matter a little bit more. Overall, though, it's pretty much always worth it to get something like dark matter engines and just buy the extra dark matter you need with trade. Living metal augmentations has had their pop upkeep increased as well from 0.01 per 100, which is in essence one living metal per 10,000 pops, I want to say, which is really not that much, but up to 0.03, which is now going to be one living metal per 3,300 and something pops. This is, again, to make the cost matter more. Biomimetic assembly has been massively nerfed from 50% replicated job efficiency down to 20%. Matrix trading, again, a massive nerf, 50% trade job efficiency down to 20%. And the upkeep has been doubled from 0.01 rare crystals per 100 pops to 0.02. Again, economic nerfs. Moat-powered tools, the upkeep has been doubled. Exotic fuel consumption. They've changed the job efficiency to 100% across the board to just 100% for complex and specialist drones, and they've increased the upkeep from 0.04 exotic gases per 100 pops to 0.05. This means that for every, for every 2,000 pops, roughly, you're going to be paying one exotic gas. For 10% specialist and complex drone efficiency, that seems great, actually. I think that trait has really survived this quite well. Volatile Moat Reactor has been changed, and again, I think this does nerf Modular Ascension. Instead of granting 30% habitability, it's now 10% worker and menial drone job efficiency. And again, a massive increase, actually, this one, to the upkeep, 0.02 volatile moats per 100 pops up to 0.05. Rare Crystal Exterior has gone from 20% metallurgist job efficiency to plus 30% habitability, and again a big increase in the upkeep. I don't think this one's actually going to be worth it, though maybe. It really does depend. I don't think habitability for machines is generally that difficult to stack or find. I mean, you can usually get to 75% just by modding. Why would you need that 30% habitability when technologies exist and when traditions exist and other things like that? Would you believe me if I told you we're on the last little segment of the balance changes? Yes, so far we've just done improvements, and then pretty much the last hour of your life has been spent listening to the balance changes coming in 4.3. The Arcology Project and districts on Ecumenopolis worlds will now cost alloys instead of minerals. This is a real slap in the face. This kind of makes minerals entirely useless in the mid and late game after you've got enough. Once you've got, say, 10,000 or so stored up in the bank, 5 or 10,000, you don't need more. And trying to push up extra numbers is not going to be worthwhile at all anymore because you need alloys now to make an Ecumenopolis world. Dictatorial Cybervision grants a flat cyborg job efficiency bonus and scaling stability for enforcers. That's a little bit of a nerf there. Physiological Transcendency now gives plus 2 unity per 100 politicians instead of plus 3 per 100 elite jobs. And Dictatorial Cybervision and Homogeneous Submission grant Governing Ethics Attraction instead of Authoritarian Ethics Attraction, which is actually a bonus, I think, overall. That's not a nerf, that's a positive, as long as you weren't desperately trying to get, a fanatical authoritarian. If you were trying to just keep your factions happy, this is a big bonus. There are a host of bug fix changes. In total, I'm going to be showing you all of the pages of them, but I've got 7 slides here to go through. I'm not going to go through them every event because most of these bug fixes aren't necessarily massively important. For example, from this sheet here, fix the ship automation button flickering, or ship designs don't regain auto upgrade on loading. That was on the first slide. We're long past that, I suppose. But these sorts of bug fixes are good and important, and if you want to read all of them, you can see them on your screen. You can pause the video and take a look. But most of these are just minor things. One noteworthy addition is that ground collateral combat will now no longer kill the last 300 pops on a planet instead of the last 3. Currently it won't kill the last 3. It should have been 300. That's a change that hasn't moved over in 4.0. It's finally been fixed, meaning that you can't go below 300 pops on a planet from collateral damage. Huzzah! I'm sad about that. It means the planet can't die, I suppose, but we have to live on. What are the AI changes? Actually, not many, which I'm finding a little confusing given the massive state of economic overhaul we've had. Now, my assumption is that behind the scenes, the devs have changed some AI behavior to be able to play this new update. If they haven't, that might explain why, relative to other empires, I'm feeling more powerful in 4.3 than I actually did in 4.2, even though in 4.2 the numbers were crazier. AI empires will now prefer to have 3 or fewer undeveloped colonies before colonizing the next one. Sorry, I didn't mean undeveloped, I meant underdeveloped. So If they have 3 or fewer colonies that have less than 1,000 pops, they won't colonize a new planet, thus massively slowing down the rate of new colony acquisition for these empires. I'm also assuming this means that they won't be building a ridiculous number of habitats and leaving them empty now. If they do, that will be very sucky, but I'm hopeful that isn't a change that's coming. We'll have to see how AI is handling 4.3 though, as we all get to play on it from now. What about stability and performance changes? Well, as mentioned earlier when we looked at the graphs, there have been significant improvements to calculations made when bypasses are updated. That means it's from the order of 150 microseconds down to 5 microseconds. That's microsecond, isn't it? Yeah, 10 to the minus 6. Reduced number of memory allocations, optimized string allocations, more string optimizations. This probably sounds like arcane crap, arcane incantations. You don't understand anything about programming. So, I can't bother getting into it. Reduced repeated localization lookups when calculating planet modifiers. Basically, this is all about how the game is running calculations, in essence. Is it? Let me check. Reduced number of memory allocations. So basically, the game is going to be using less memory in your computer. The string allocations within that memory has been optimized. So when it's storing words, in essence, a string is, you can think of that as a word. You've got lots of characters added together to be a string or some text. That has been optimized. I'm assuming the optimization means it takes up less space and is better used. There are more string optimizations overall, so more of them. Reduced repeated localization lookups when calculating planet modifiers. So when a planet has a modifier applied to it, what we're doing now is we are not repeatedly doing the calculation over and over again. I'm assuming the devs are storing something as a variable partway through and then referring to that variable over and over rather than repeatedly just redoing the calculation, even not calculation. If there's a localization lookup, localization being language changes. Moved modifier name calculations to tooltip generations where this was done in the game situation. Micro-optimized localization system even more, reducing amount of allocations, recursions, and length calculations. I'm assuming, given it keeps talking about localization system, this is not really going to affect English localizations. This will be for the other ones, possibly, but I'm not sure. Optimized resource list in the planet UI. Secured the execution around planet event to be evaluated in a place that is more out of sync safe. They've also moved more trigger executions from planet modifier calculations to daily pulse. That means that every day they're going to be calculated now. Is that right? Okay. That would seem worse, but apparently it's better. Removed an unnecessary update of triggered modifiers on planets. Fixed crash in planet view when you're looking at the economy tab when expanding jobs. They fixed a rare faction and focus card out of sync on Hotjoin. Fixed an issue where randomized heights of coordinates could trigger an out of sync. Reduced the likelihood of a massive out of sync at the game start, thank God. Reduced stack usage in combat targeting code that used to cause crash to desktop and undefined behavior when larger number of ships were involved in the combat. Ironically, there are fewer ships now, but still. There are more string optimizations. I think we've seen that twice now. Yeah, that's been repeated. They rebuilt the library Paradox SDK.so for Linux to make it more compatible with the Steam runtime environment, as well as directly run in Ubuntu 20 compatible distribution. That's pretty cool. Wow, okay. All right, that's pretty cool. Significantly reduced the lag spike when creating the Solarpunk country. Optimization of functions related to strings, optimized memory allocation and alert manager, and improved fleet icon logic. Overall, some good stability and performance improvements, I guess. The main things here, the main improvements we're getting to our performance, though, are coming from the game changes they've made, the gameplay changes, I think. The reduced ship counts and that sort of stuff. Wait, I'm lying to you, there's another page. They've added economic threading changes, so new dependency tracking should reduce the CPU wait time when updating and reducing the monthly stutter. Decrease sizes of threaded batches for objects that are many and becomes uneven in CPU need for better distribution over multiple cores. That English is written funky. That was written by somebody who's spending too much time programming. Added modifier threading changes, mainly for using memory and reduced time spent on allocations or deallocations in the update. They've decreased sizes of threaded batches for objects that are many and becomes uneven in CPU, need for better distribution over multiple cores. Yeah, here as well. What? Decreased size of threaded patches for objects that are many. What is an object that is many? Is that trying to say that when there are multiple of the same object? And when they become uneven in their CPU needs. Okay, so I think this is saying when you've got multiple objects, and some objects need lots of CPU calculations to be run, whereas some don't, there's now going to be a better distribution over multiple cores. That's good though. More core usage is good. That might also be partially why we're getting such good speeds now. There has been a major rework of modifier calculations for planets, pop groups, armies, leaders, ships, and fleets. Massive boost there to everything, I think. Moving trigger-dependent calculations out to suitable pulses instead, micro, daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly, rather than kind of constantly trying to again and again and again work out some calculations. Number of trigger evaluations has been optimized. The devs have removed some redundant modifier updates for armies and from pops. They've optimized allocations when counting species. They've moved script calculations out of modifier calculations for better performance. This is basically the performance update, pretty much, folks. They've moved some trigger evaluations out of modifier calculations for better performance. I think, did I read that already? I'm losing my marbles here. We've been going so long. This has taken days. They fixed a bug that was disabling threading of the economic system introduced in earlier open beta. This should be especially noticeable, or rather it should no longer be noticeable, on the monthly calculations, which should now be more seamless. They fixed performance regression in language localization systems and addressed some They've addressed some stack overflows on macros, on macos. I'm losing my mind, sorry. We're almost there. There's another page here about optimization stuff. This is actually really interesting. I wish my brain wasn't so frazzled and yours either. So, they've optimized event parameter storage, and they've had some massive improvements pretty much across the board here. 95%, 83% I'm seeing in some cases, and consistently. Also, there's a summary of changes which have resulted in smoother gameplay, reduced load on memory allocation, and frame processing time has been reduced by 10%. This is from improved scripted trigger caching, optimizing the string allocation to make it 76% faster. The render cycle is now optimized to perform as if V-sync were off, but without screen tearing. How the hell did they do that? Yeah, I don't know enough about this anymore. They've replaced threads with threading.task thread count console command for setting or getting the worker counts for thread pools. Sure, why not? Reduce the amount of worker tasks being created for the thread pools to be more in line with the amount of physical calls instead of logical. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. But what have we got virtual cores? I guess that depends on how is that set in the settings. I don't know. Let's move on. Last but by no means least, there have been some UI changes and modding changes. You can read these on your screen now. I'm done with these patch notes though. Oh my god, this was the largest patch notes in history, and there was a lot of content to cover in here. A lot to talk about. Thank you if you've stuck with me. If you'd like to watch some Stellaris 4.3 content, I'll link a playthrough on your screen right now. Go and check that out. That's me playing some Stellaris 4.3. I think it might even involve some roleplay. But otherwise, see you soon. I've been Montu. You've been lovely. If you want to watch that video, click it on your screen now.